So, without further ado, I will now begin A Nightmare on Elm Street Suffered the Children, an original novel by David Bishop. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. Shakespeare, Hamlet. Chapter 1. Alex Corwin woke with a start. She had been dreaming an old familiar dream in which she was flying, swooping and soaring above the suburbs, looking down on everyone going about their little lives, all of them too busy or self-absorbed to see her high in the clouds overhead. Alex loved that dream, the sense of utter freedom and release, but it always ended the same way. She would recognize someone below and call out to them, "Dad! Dad, I'm up here!" But her father never turned around, never heard her. He got into his car and drove away, leaving her alone in the sky. Suddenly, she would be falling, the ground rushing towards her, hands forward to protect her as... Then she was awake, gasping for breath, her body shaking with sweat glistening on her skin. No matter how often she had the dream, her father never looked at her. He had left them years ago. Alex's mom had torn his face out of every family photo. It was getting so Alex couldn't remember what her father looked like anymore. He was just a man getting into a car and driving away, leaving her behind, abandoning both of them. If he looked back just once, she felt sure all the hurting would go away, but he never did. Alex pushed the dream aside and tried to focus on her surroundings, but she did not recognize them. The room was a bare white space, perfectly square. Its only furniture the hospital gurney on which she was lying. 2 of the walls were featureless, while a third had a door with no handle. The 4th wall was a floor-to-ceiling mirror, its reflective surface stretching from wall to wall. The room had no obvious form of ventilation, yet Alex could feel a cool breeze evaporating the sweat from her skin. Where was she? No sound crept into the room from outside. There was no smell beyond a whiff of disinfectant to betray her location. The sheet beneath her on the gurney had that overstarched crispness she remembered from 2 days in a New York hospital while recovering from concussions suffered in a car crash. Perhaps she had been in another accident? The pale blue cotton gown she was wearing reinforced that notion. But why did she have no memory of coming here? Was she suffering from amnesia? At least she could remember the word amnesia. That was a good sign. The 17-year-old could not help smiling at such logic. But what kind of a hospital kept you in a room without a door handle? A hospital for crazy people? A dark voice muttered in the back of her mind. She ignored that thought and sat up, swinging her legs over the side of the gurney. Looking at herself in the mirrored wall, Alex could see no obvious evidence she had been in an accident. Her face showed no wounds or bruises, just the usual smattering of freckles across her cheeks and small, slightly upturned nose. Her coffee-colored hair and skin still showed signs of a summer holiday in Mexico. The only scars visible were on her arms, but those came from old wounds, old hurts, nothing new there. So why was she here? And where was here exactly? She slid her weight forward until her feet touched the floor. The linoleum was very cold beneath her toes. Alex was conscious of the gap at the back of her gown and the fact she was wearing nothing underneath it. No bra, no panties. Anybody standing behind me is going to get a good look at my butt, she thought ruefully. Well, at least it's a cute butt. She walked towards the mirror, reaching one hand out towards it. If this was a dream, her hand would no doubt plunge through the glass like it was water. But the mirror was solid to the touch. Perhaps it was a 2-way? She smirked and gave the finger to anyone on the other side. As an afterthought, Alex turned and flipped up the hem of her gown, flashing her ass at the mirror. Get an eyeful of that, creeps. The door abruptly swung open and 3 stern-faced middle-aged men wearing white doctor's coats bustled inside. All were clutching clipboards, ballpoint pens safely stored in plastic pocket protectors. 2 of the men wore heavy black-rimmed glasses that had been out of fashion for at least a decade, while the other had mismatched argyle socks. Psychiatrist, Alex realized in an instant, her heart sinking. She was back in the clutches of the head shrinkers. What had she done this time? An orderly followed the doctors inside, clad in a white hospital smock and pants, matching white sneakers on his feet. He winked at Alex, rolling his eyes at the doctors in a gesture of sympathy, but his pinched features and piercing eyes only made her more conscious of how little she was wearing. The orderly carried 4 stacked plastic chairs into the room, setting 3 of them down in a row. The 4th was positioned several feet away, facing the others. The lead doctor pointed impatiently at the gurney, and the orderly wheeled it out, the door shutting behind him. The doctors sat beside each other, the man in the middle obviously their leader. He gestured for Alex to sit opposite them. "Miss Corwin, could you join us?" His voice had the bland, studied tones Alex had heard so many times before. Nothing threatening, nothing intimidating, all soothing words and quiet phrases. Don't get the patient excitable, don't express an emotion, keep everything under control. It made her want to scream. "What if I don't want to?" "That's entirely up to you. But you will feel more comfortable if you sit." "Why? How long will this take?" "How long do you think this should take?" "Spare me the what do you think bullshit, okay?" Alex sauntered over to the chair and flipped it sideways before sitting. She had no intention of giving these three assholes a free peep show. "I've been in and out of therapy since I was 13. Just ask your fucking questions and let's get this over with." All three men began making notes, pens scratching hurriedly against the pages on their clipboards. Their leader looked up again and smiled. "I'm sorry. You must think me terribly rude. I am Dr. Herbert Wallace, and these are my colleagues, Doctors Nim and Rod," Alex suggested. Kaufman and Jones, actually. Whatever. Alex folded her arms and was rewarded with more scribbling. "Let me guess, patient displays defensive body language, coupled with a confrontational attitude and aggressive choice of vocabulary?" The scribbling stopped. "How did you—" "Like I said, I know the drill. Cut the fucking chase, Herb." "It's Herbert." "Like I give a shit, Herb." Wallace set his clipboard aside and smiled insincerely. "Fine. I will cut to the chase, as you put it. Why do you harm yourself?" "Harm myself?" Alex shifted in her seat. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. Those scars on your forearms. The ones you always tell people came from a rather vicious cat your family once had. You made those scars yourself, didn't you? It's a recognized psychiatric condition known as self-harming." "No, you're wrong. You took a razor blade from the bathroom cabinet at home one day and slowly, methodically drew the sharpened edge across your arm until it sliced through the skin." Alex shook her head. "No, You were angry, and you didn't know why. You were stressed, and you didn't know how to cope. You felt lonely in a crowded room, alone among people who claimed to be your friends. So when you were by yourself, you would take a blade and cut yourself. That isn't true. You couldn't cry. You couldn't talk about your problems. You wouldn't talk about your problems. If somebody forced you to talk, then you would lie. You weren't sure what was real and what wasn't. You probably still aren't sure even now. You used people and you hurt people, and then you began hurting yourself. Isn't that right?" Alex's fingers were clenched around the hem of her gown, knuckles glowing white, her head shaking from side to side. "No! No! You would slice the skin open and expose your flesh. Blood would start flowing, and it made you feel better, made you feel your pain was being released, as if the bloodletting was draining all of the misery, all the hurt. You couldn't cry tears, so you made tears from your own blood. You've got it wrong. You did it to get attention. You wanted to be nurtured, to be cared for, to be looked after. You were turning all your aggression, all your anger, and all your hatred back in on yourself, blaming yourself, hurting yourself. No! No! You did it because of your need to control others, to control your environment, even when you couldn't control yourself. You did it because you hated yourself and everyone around you, and the pain made you feel better." Alex drew her chair aside and ran to the door, her fingers clawing at the edges, trying to find a way out, desperate to get a grip. But her fingers felt numb and useless. "Did you abuse yourself in other ways, Alex? Is that why you can't talk about this? Are you too ashamed to admit what you've been doing?" Wallace was behind her now, looming over her, his breath hot on the back of her neck, the smell of boiled eggs and stale coffee and body odor assaulting her nostrils. She had to get away from here, away from him. She had to escape. "Still got nothing to tell us, young lady? Not so clever now, are we? Not so high and mighty." Wallace turned away, snapping his fingers in the air. "Bring in her mother," he shouted. The door opened inwards, pushing Alex back. Mrs. Corwin was ushered in by the orderly and was given the chair that Alex had been sitting on. She's been crying, Alex realized, recognizing the telltale puffiness and redness around the eyes. Probably about me. Her mom was dressed in a crisp white top and faded blue jeans, a Kleenex clutched in one hand. The years of struggle had left their scars, but she had kept in shape, always hoping to find a new man. Alex looked at her mom and knew she was looking at her own future. In 25 years, I'll have the same wrinkles and a bottle of hair dye always stocked in the bathroom. Mrs. Corwin sank into the seat and smiled hopefully at her daughter. The orderly closed the door and stood in front of it, blocking the only exit. He smiled at Alex, but something about his face unsettled her. He almost looked hungry. Dr. Wallace was back in his own seat. He cleared his throat to get the new arrival's attention. Miss Corwin, we were hoping you might be able to help us with the questions young Alexandra seems unable or unwilling to answer. Of course, she replied. I want her to get better. I want my baby to stop hurting herself. As do we all, Wallace said. When did she start cutting herself? I guess that was 4 years ago, after she turned 13. You see, my husband had left us, and the split was quite traumatic. So you think that triggered these incidents? That's what other doctors have told me, Alex's mom frowned. But I've tried to move on since then. Why hasn't she? Perhaps there is another cause, Wallace suggested. Can you tell us when your daughter had her first period? Mrs. Corwin's face betrayed her shock. Please, doctor, I'm not sure. Forgive my bluntness, but we are trying to uncover difficult truths here. If you cannot answer the simplest of questions, no matter how personally embarrassing, I don't see how you can expect us to help your daughter. She nodded uncertainly. It was her 13th birthday. She was having a party with friends, and there was an accident. Had Alexandra begun cutting herself before that? No, it began a few months later, but I don't see how. Wallace held up a hand for silence. Recent papers in medical journals have suggested a new theory to explain self-harming. I believe it may be applicable in the case of Alexandra. My name's Alex, creep, but nobody paid her any attention. I have one last question, Miss Corwin. Has your daughter had her first sexual experience yet, to the best of your knowledge? Mom, don't answer that. You don't have to answer that. No, I don't think so, Miss Corwin said and smiled sweetly. We moved around the country a lot due to my job, so it hasn't been easy for her to make friends. There have been a few boys sniffing around, but I managed to keep them away. Indeed. Well, that's most illuminating. Wallace began consulting in whispers with his colleagues, while Mrs. Corwin smirked at her daughter. Yes, I think the little bitch is still a virgin. Alex staggered back a step, shocked at what her mom was saying. How could she know that? Why was she saying these things? It didn't make sense. By now, Wallace and his colleagues had come to a conclusion. The trio stood up to deliver their diagnosis. Mrs. Corwin, we believe your daughter is sublimating her latent sexual desires, perhaps from guilt, perhaps from some deeper self-loathing. Rather than deal with the reality of sexual penetration, she has been using razor blades to penetrate her skin, to simulate the same blood flow many female virgins experience after their hymen is broken. It is a medically proven fact that cutting causes the body to release its own opiate-like chemicals to reduce pain. Some self-harmers become addicted to their body's heroin-like reaction to extreme pain, as sexual addicts crave the release of an orgasm. Alexandra is an extreme case, but Alex felt herself screaming denials, but nobody was listening. Wallace and the other doctors were clustered around her mom, comforting her. They led her out of the room, ignoring all of Alex's protestations. As they departed, Wallace told the orderly to sedate the patient so treatment could begin immediately. The door closed, leaving Alex and the orderly in the stark white chamber. The teenager was still shaking her head in disbelief. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening, she thought to herself. Oh, it's real all right, the orderly whispered, licking his lips. He peeled off his white smock to reveal a dirty red and green sweater underneath. Alex noticed the orderly's hospital-issue pants were now jeans, stained with oil and what looked like splashes of fresh blood. Instead of white, soft-soled sneakers, he was wearing battered work boots. But most disturbing was his skin. It was changing, as if being cooked while she still stretched across his body. Burns scarred appeared on the face and hands, while the stench of roasting flesh pulsated from him. Alex gagged involuntarily, holding a hand over her mouth to stop herself vomiting. The orderly howled in pain and doubled over, twisting away from her into a crouch. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Are you all right?" "Never better," the orderly replied, straightening up again. He produced a battered felt hat, put it on his head, and swiveled around to face Alex. The features were still recognizable as those of the orderly, but now the skin was healed like a decades-old wound, and the eyes shone with malevolence. His face was a grotesque, repulsive parody of what had been there before. "Who are you?" she whispered, backing away. "You're new in town," he leered. "I guess that's why you don't know me. The children call me Freddy. We're going to be very good friends, you and I." "I don't think so," Alex replied. She wanted to run, but her legs felt so weak she could hardly stand. She wanted to scream, but it died in her throat. She was helpless and terrified. A dentist's chair appeared behind her, and she tumbled backwards into it. Metal clamps swung into place, locking her into the chair. The heaviest clamp pressed her back against the black leather, while more bands of metal pinned her arms and legs in place. The orderly smiled, cruel lips drawn back to reveal yellow teeth and rotting gums. He stood to one side of Alex, crouching forward, so his face was close to hers. Gleaming eyes stared into hers, while his foul breath invaded her lungs. "The doctors say you like to cut yourself." "I don't do that anymore," Alex said, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Perhaps I can lend you a hand." He raised his right arm in front of Alex's face. The hand was encased in a battered old glove, torn and threadbare across the palm. Metal rings encased each finger. Clamped to these were 4 blades, each extending outwards into razor-sharp blades of metal. The orderly flexed his fingers, and the blades clanged crisply against each other, like so many butcher's knives. He brought the slithers of metal closer and closer to Alex's face. "Now, where should I start cutting? I'll let you choose." Alex shook her head, too terrified to speak. "The face? You want me to cut your face first?" "No," she gasped. "Spoil sports. What about your chest?" He slashed downwards, his finger knives neatly slicing 4 long cuts into the fabric of her gown. Alex looked down, but no blood was visible. The blades had just missed her skin. Her tormentor used his free hand to pull apart the fabric, exposing Alex's pert breast. My, you are the little cutie," he chuckled. "Good enough to eat." He reached forward with his gloved hand and rested the flat side of the blade against her left nipple. She jumped with shock at the touch of cold metal against her skin. "Careful," he warned, his voice guttural. "You almost made me slice something off." He threw back his head and laughed. Alex could feel a cold sweat of terror soaking the back of her gown. "Why are you doing this?" she asked helplessly. "Because I enjoy it," he replied, his breath hot and heavy on her face. "And so do you, bitch. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, letting it bleed." The orderly removed his finger knives from Alex's chest and placed them against one of her arms instead. The blade sliced deep into her flesh, blood oozing up around the shiny metal and trickling down onto the floor. She cried out in pain, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Was it good for you, too?" he asked, licking the blood from his blades. "Slicing your arms is all very well, but if you want the real deal, I'll have to cut you in other places." He reached his gloved hand down between her legs, the blade slowly drawing back the fabric of the gown to reveal her upper thighs. Alex tried to force her legs together, but the cold metal clamps kept them apart. No, please," she begged. "Your mouth says no, but your eyes say yes," he taunted, flicking his tongue rapidly backwards and forwards between his snarling lips in a grotesque lapping motion. "I'll be the first to taste your cherry pie, little girl. You should thank me." He leaned forward and licked a tear from the side of her face. His gloved hand drew back from between Alex's legs, ready to plunge down and into her. "Are you ready for me? Here comes Daddy!" "No!" Alex woke with a start. She sat bolt upright in bed, still panting with terror, heart hammering inside her chest. She looked around the bedroom. She was home. She was safe. It had been a dream, just a very bad dream. A nightmare. She flopped back into the pillow, still trying to catch her breath. It had been so real. She could still smell the fetid breath of that thing, that monster that had been about to... "Alex, are you all right, honey?" Her mom was calling from downstairs, the smell of cooking bacon, signaling breakfast was nearly ready. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine," Alex called, but she still searched the room for reassurance. Everything was as she remembered. The computer on a desk in the corner, her iPod and headphones next to it. An old stereo and a pile of CDs stood in another corner, neglected and gathering dust. The usual carpet of dirty clothes was strewn across the floor, no different, just an obstacle course of T-shirts and discarded lingerie. The rest of the bedroom was cluttered with half-open boxes. They'd been here for 2 months and Alex still hadn't unpacked everything, but that was habit. Her mom's frequent job relocations meant it wasn't worth doing. You only had to pack it all again, usually less than a year later. Alex sat up and winced at stabbing pains in her right arm. She pulled back the covers to find 4 fresh cuts sliced into the flesh, blood still dribbling from the wounds. A crimson stain malted her sheets where her arm had been. What the fuck? It had only been a nightmare, hadn't it? But the cuts were exactly like the ones that creep had given her in the dream. But that was just a nightmare, and it left only one explanation. Terrific, she muttered. Now I'm cutting myself in my sleep. Alex, hurry up, you'll be late for school, her mom shouted. And the hits keep on coming, the teenager thought ruefully. I'll be down in a minute, okay? She got out of bed, nursing her wounded arm. First things first, I need to find a dressing. Alice took a look at her cuts. Forget that, I need several dressings. Then she had to hide the blood-stained sheets. If her mom saw those, it would be a short trip back to the psychiatric ward, and Alex had no wish to revisit her own version of Girl Interrupted. The first thing Peter O'Mahony did after waking was switch on his computer. It was the same every morning, whether it was Christmas Day or just another Tuesday like today. Before he brushed his teeth or pulled on his jeans, even before he put on his glasses, Peter hit the button that gave him access to the world outside. Want to listen to the radio? You could do that via the web. Got the urge to watch the hottest TV shows? Then you could download the latest episode to your hard drive overnight, sometimes before it had even aired. Need to talk to a friend? Enter a chat room, or better yet, instant message them. Wake up with a raging hard-on and in need of some quick relief? The web was your friend there too, offering an array of hardcore delights only a mouse click away. Shit, he could go anywhere, do anything, be anyone he wanted online, all without leaving his bedroom. That suited Peter just fine. The less time he had to spend with his dad, the better. All they ever did was argue. You should get outside more. It isn't healthy staying in your bedroom all the time. You'll go blind if you keep staring at that computer all night. Blah, blah. On and on it went. The same old mantra. Peter had downloaded a fistful of medical papers from online journals to prove his father wrong, but the old bastard had thrown them in the trash. Don't get smart with me, young man. I'm still your father, and you will respect me. Peter fantasized about his father blowing a blood vessel, popping the vein that bulged on his forehead when he got angry. While still a child, Peter decided he must have been adopted, or else his mom had slept with the college professor while his dad was out of town. That was the only credible explanation for the stark differences between father and son. Brian O'Mahony was a 45-year-old construction foreman, a proud blue-collar working man with dirt under his fingernails and a busted knee from his days as a linebacker. He had met Peter's mom while in hospital after his knee blew out, and the pair got married young, both still in their late teens. Peter was born a few months later. Premature birth was his folks' explanation. Shotgun marriage was Peter's calculation, when he was old enough to do the math. Life had been okay while his mom was still alive. She worked a lot of night shifts, but doted on her son, called Peter her special boy. The cancer that killed her had been slow and painful, months of chemotherapy followed by a terminal decline. But even at the funeral, Peter never once saw his father cry. He was a man's man, and real men don't cry. Maybe if I'd been a brain-dead jock like him, we'd have something to talk about, Peter thought. We'd crack open a beer and sit out on the porch, bullshitting about scrimmaging and touchdowns and scoring with cheerleaders. But the only cheerleaders Peter got close to were the ones that undressed on his computer screen, coyly sucking on one finger while slipping their other hand inside their white cotton panties. "Peter, what did I tell you about putting out the garbage?" The voice thundered through the walls, a bellow of suppressed fury. "I'll do it before I catch the bus." "You'll do it now, young man." "Yes, sir." Peter sighed and shook his head while shutting down the computer. "The sooner I graduate and get away from this place, the better." Peter tugged his jeans on over his shorts, pulled a checked shirt over his head, and stuffed his feet into his sneakers, lurking by the door. He paused in front of the mirror, trying to recreate the habitual side parting in his brown hair, without much success. "You better not be ignoring me, young man." I'm coming," Peter shouted back. "Don't get your panties in a bunch," he whispered to himself. A heavy fist hammered against the door. "What did you just say?" his dad demanded. Peter undid the lock and opened the door. "I said I'm coming." Not for the first time was Alex grateful that she had her own bathroom. The house was way too large for the two of them, but Alex wasn't complaining. They had moved to Springwood during the summer break, and the most decent places in the Ohio town had been outside their price range, especially as a rental. It was Alex who found the house while surfing the web. It was fully renovated and remodeled since the last occupants had left, with 4 bedrooms, plenty of living rooms, and a basement offering extensive storage space. A nice, quiet neighborhood, within walking distance to the high school, and dirt cheap. What was the catch? The realtor even tried to talk them out of inspecting the property. "It's been empty for a year," he said, refusing to go inside. "The last residents left after an, unfortunate incident. There was a murder, and it wasn't the first in that house." "Next you'll be telling us the Manson family stopped here on their way through Ohio," Alex's mom had joked. They searched the house but could find no evidence of the atrocities supposed to have happened inside. 3 days later, they were the new residents of 1428 Elm Street. Alex had noticed the secretary at her new school giving her a strange look when she mentioned the address while enrolling. The behavior of other residents in Elm Street was just as odd. Most times when Alex and her mom arrived in a new town, the busybody neighbors couldn't wait to knock on the door and introduce themselves. Springwood was different. Nobody popped around. Nobody said hello, and passerbys didn't even glance at the house from the sidewalk. In fact, they seemed to go out of the way to avoid looking at the house. Anybody walking a dog crossed the road first before drawing level with the place. Whatever happened here in the past, it had freaked out the locals big time. Intrigued, Alex searched the internet to find out more, but could find no record of their new home. It was almost as if all mention of the murders and their cause had been erased. Alex staunched the bleeding from her cuts and taped a makeshift dressing around the arm. That would have to do until after school, when she could stop at a drugstore and get a proper bandage. Satisfied with the repair job, Alex peeled off the old checkered shirt she usually wore in bed and had a quick shower. She toweled herself dry, then pulled on a fresh pair of panties and a white t-shirt. Green combat trousers and matching shirt finished the ensemble. A handful of gel spiked her boyish shock of hair, maintaining the androgynous exterior. Alex had been through enough schools to know looking anonymous meant nobody bothered you, and that suited her. Don't get attached and you won't get hurt. Satisfied, she grabbed the iPod and headphones, shoved them into her backpack, and headed for the kitchen. "Shouldn't you be at the gym by now?" Chris Harris looked up to see his father walk into the kitchen, nodding a tie. Chris gestured at his little sister beside him. Her homework spread across the table. She was biting her bottom lip while writing letters of the alphabet into her schoolbook. "I'm helping Marion with her ABCs right now." Gideon Harris stopped in the doorway and glared at his 18-year-old son. "Don't take that tone of voice with me." "I'm sorry, sir. It's..." Chris's head sank forward. "It's what? Look at me when you're talking." Chris forced himself to meet his father's gaze. "I promised Marion I'd help her. But Coach kept us back late last night after the game to run drills, so this is the only spare time I've got." Marion smiled hopefully, proudly displaying the new teeth that had come through over the summer. "Please, Daddy, can Chris help me?" But their father was adamant. "Sorry, Marion, your brother has got other commitments and responsibilities he must meet first. He'll never win that scholarship unless he puts the hours in and shows he's got what it takes to step up." The little girl's face dropped again. "Yes, Daddy," she said discontentedly. "Isn't that right, Chris?" Gideon asked. "Yes, sir." "Good. I'm glad we agree. Marion, go brush your teeth, and then I'll drive you to school." She nodded obediently and hurried to the bathroom upstairs, leaving Chris and his father alone in the kitchen. Gideon poured a cup of coffee from the pot, adding enough milk to make the liquid match the coloring of his brown skin. "The college scout is due in 2 weeks, son. You need to be at your best to impress him. There are plenty of other boys chasing that scholarship ride." Chris rose and collected his gym bag from beside the washing machine. The smell of freshly laundered clothing drifted up from inside. No matter how busy she was, Chris's mother always found time to make sure he had clean workout gear. "Sir, I was wondering..." "Yes, Chris?" Gideon put down the coffee and looked intently at his son. But Chris's nerve failed him. "It's nothing important." "All right, then. You better get off to the gym, boy." "Yes, sir. Have a good day." You too, son. Gideon picked up the Springwood Chronicle from the kitchen table and began reading the front page. Chris watched his father for a moment before walking out of the kitchen door, ducking his head beneath the top of the frame. Being over 6 feet tall had plenty of advantages on the basketball court, but the Harris family home was not designed for people of above average height. A modest 3-bedroom house, it was always kept clean and tidy. They might be the poorest family on Elm Street, but Chris's father maintained it was no excuse for being slovenly. Don't give our white neighbors any excuse to look down their noses at us, he often said. Have pride in your appearance, and you'll be respected. Chris's long stride hurried him along Elm Street towards school. He could feel his stomach churning, anger at his own cowardice seething inside. It's nothing important. No, just the rest of my life I wanted to talk about, he thought unhappily. Every time he tried to bring the subject up, his father would look at his with that same stark expression, those dark brown eyes, that expectant face. It all said one thing. We're counting on you, Chris. We've worked all our lives to give you this chance, so you can't back out now. How can I tell him that Coach is threatening to drop me from the team? Chris started. Then he began running, not noticing the teenager in glasses struggling to carry bags of garbage out of a nearby house. Right now, Chris didn't want to see anyone. He just wanted to escape. Oh, Alex, her mom said despairingly. You're not wearing that again, are you? You'll never get a boyfriend if you dress like that, dear. Alex snorted derisively. Have you seen the boys in this town, Mom? She opened the fridge and emptied a carton of juice from the door into a glass. Yes, but you'll scare them away in that. Joyce was wearing an immaculate blue jacket and shirt, her blouse crisply ironed and makeup perfectly applied. You need to take more care with your appearance. Otherwise, nobody will want to take care of you. Alex rolled her eyes while sliding 3 strips of bacon into a hot dog roll. I can take care of myself. Besides, that's the last thing most boys want to do. Well, at least sit down to eat your breakfast. Can't. I'm running late, remember? Alex swallowed the last of her juice and was already striding towards the door, taking the rest of breakfast with her. Alexandra Marie Corwin, you will stop right there. Alex sighed. Her full name only got used when her mom had something important to say. Alex swung around slowly. You called? Joyce shook her head in exasperation. Alex, look, I am as sick of moving as you, okay? But this time I think we're going to be here for a while. A year at least. You need to put some roots down, like I'm trying to do. Country clubs and yoga classes aren't really my thing, Mom. You know what I mean. You've got such a sweet face. You could make so much more of yourself. Alex scowled. Can I go? Why don't you invite some friends home from school one night? Because I don't have any friends, okay? Satisfied, Mom? I'm sorry. I saved the speech for later. I've got to go. Alex stormed from the kitchen, grabbing her rucksack from the hallway. But her mother wasn't giving up yet and followed her to the front door. What time will you be home? Late. I've got detention, Alex snapped as she slammed the door shut. What did you do this time? Joyce shouted after her daughter, but Alex was already out of earshot. Happy birthday, darling! Tammy Sutherland jingled a set of car keys in the air. Mom, you haven't, Heather said, shaking her head in disbelief. Well, my little princess needs a set of wheels if she plans to go for those auditions in Cincinnati next month. Tammy threw her daughter the keys. It's out on the drive. Your Uncle Ted's been keeping it on his lot for us. Heather ran to the kitchen window and looked outside. A sporty little convertible was parked on the drive, a gigantic pink bow stuck on the hood. I don't believe it. Wait, where did you get the money? Tammy smiled thinly. I borrowed it from your trust fund, and Ted gave me a rate. Don't worry. I'm sure you'll be able to pay me back with your first modeling job. She lit a cigarette and sighed. I can't believe my little baby is 18. I remember the day I brought you home from the hospital. Heather's happiness turned to a scowl. You took the money from my trust fund? That's supposed to pay for college, Mom. Her mother waved such concerns away, all the while adjusting her blonde bouffant's hair in one of the many mirrors lining the walls of their house. You don't want bother your pretty little head about things like that, darling. When you're a famous model or Miss America, nobody will care whether you went to college or not. I'll care, Mom. Hush. Tammy went to Heather's side and pointed at the convertible. Look at the car. Why are you worrying about college when you could be planning all the fun you'll be having behind the wheel of that? Or even in the back seat, if you know what I mean. Tammy gave her daughter an elbow in the side before bursting into a raucous, cackling laugh. My, oh my, the things I got up to in the back seat of a convertible when I was your age. It would make your hair curl, darling. It would make your hair curl. Yes, Mom. Tammy peered at her daughter's blonde hair. Speaking of which, I think it's time you went back to the salon. Your roots are starting to show through. Heather pulled away from her mother. They're fine, Mom. Whatever you say, darling. I thought it might be nice if we went along together, had a day of pampering ourselves. What do you say? It's Thursday. I've got school, remember? Oh, yes. Tammy wandered away distractedly, one hand reaching for a bottle of gin. Well, off you go. Learn all you want, but remember what your mom taught you, too. How to get drunk before 10 in the morning? Yeah, that's one life lesson they don't cover at school, Heather thought sourly on her way out. But her bitterness softened at the sight of the car on the driveway. Mom might be the biggest lush on Elm Street, but she was right about one thing. Having your own car meant independence, and Heather planned to enjoy every second of it. She ripped the bow off the hood and threw it to one side before climbing in, sliding her slim, toned body behind the wheel. A twist of the key in the ignition and the engine roared into life. Heather glanced at her watch. There was time for a quick spin around the block before heading into school. Of course, it had been a while since she went to driver's ed, but the basics couldn't be so easily forgotten, could they? One pedal to give it gas, the other one to brake. Thank God this wasn't a stick shift. She'd never got the hands of gears, even on her bicycle. Heather smiled and reversed out of the driveway, at speed, tires squealing in protest. Joyce watched through a downstairs window as Alex ran off along Elm Street. Congratulations, she muttered at herself. Another master class in mother-daughter bonding. Joyce looked up the stairs to her daughter's bedroom. Normally the door was locked. Alex was fiercely protective about maintaining some privacy. But today it was ajar. Joyce speed-dialed her secretary's voicemail. Martha, I'm going to be a little late this morning. My first appointment isn't until 11, and I'll be there well before that. So hold my calls until I arrive, okay? Thanks. Joyce switched off the phone, took a deep breath, and ventured upstairs, anxiety etched into her features. It had been a year since Alex last went to therapy. The psychiatrist in North Carolina declared that the teenager was free of the troubles that had driven her to self-harming. Privately, he had warned Joyce to watch for signs of any reoccurrence or symptoms that Alex was lapsing back into her old ways. Sometimes the feelings that led to destructive behavior patterns in the past can swell up again, pushing the subject back into the same vicious cycle. Keep an eye on your daughter, ma'am, but don't make her feel like she's being watched every minute of the day. Respect her privacy, up to a point. Joyce had done her best to follow the psychiatrist's advice. It wasn't easy for them, always moving from one place to another, but Joyce had a good feeling about Springwood. The town was quiet and friendly, the people at her office more welcoming than most. Hearing about what had happened in this house was a little disturbing, but that was all in the past. They were making a fresh start here. Please let this place turn out well for us, Joyce prayed silently as she ventured into her daughter's bedroom. It was like a scene from some cop show after a burglary. Clothes were strewn across the floor, drawers hanging open, debris littering every surface. But that was typical of most teenagers' bedrooms, in Joyce's limited experience. She'd be more worried if it was tidy. Since puberty, the chaotic state of Alex's life had become a badge of honor, and her bedroom was a symptom of that. I guess I should be grateful she's a girl at least. That smell can be masked by deodorant and body spray. Joyce sifted through a few drawers and nudged aside the piles of discarded clothing to look underneath, but could find nothing out of the ordinary. No pills, no syringes, no little plastic bags with traces of white powder inside, no signs of any drug use, or at least nothing obvious. The adjoining bathroom was another story. Blood was pulled in the sink, along with a dozen blood-soaked tissues, while a crimson-stained sheet had been shoved into the wastebasket. Joyce's face fell. "Oh no," she whispered before shaking her head. "Don't jump to conclusions, Joyce. Maybe she's just having a heavy month." She returned to the bedroom and examined her daughter's mattress. There was blood there, but it was beside the pillows, not further down. "Oh, Alex," she said sadly. "You promised you wouldn't do this again. You promised." Joyce sat down on the bed and wept, a trickle of black mascara rolling down each cheek. Kat Walker hated going to Springwood High. She hated the teachers, she hated the other students, and she hated the lessons. She hated the cliques and their members, the jocks, the princesses, the stoners, the geeks, every fucking one of them. She hated the school building, its brick walls and concrete entrance, its hallways lined with lockers. its enthusiastic banners proclaiming the glorious achievements of the sports teams, its trophy cabinet crammed with prizes won by students past and present. She hated everything about it with every fiber of her being. The sooner somebody torched the place, the fucking better. It's not like she was planning to go on some crazed teen rampage in the hallways. Only losers and psychos went that far. Kat just wanted out of high school, out of Springwood, out of the whole fucking state of Ohio. It was probably a nice place to live if you believed in nice and had enjoyed your frontal lobotomy. But having to sing the state song at assembly, beautiful Ohio, I mean, give me a fucking break, or recite the state motto, with God all things are possible, made her want to puke. How Stepford could you get? Of course, by comparison to life at home, going to school was being let out of jail on a day release. If Springwood High was middle America writ large, Kat's home life was straight out of Cary. The Walkers were a devout Christian family. No, scratch that. Devout didn't cover it. Try committed. As in, they should be committed, Kat decided, flicking cigarette ash out of her bedroom window. Fundamental Christians. No, just fundamentals. Prayers in the morning, saying grace before every meal, prayers before and after lunch, prayers in the evening, Bible classes, the 10 Commandments on the bathroom door opposite the toilet so you couldn't escape the Lord even while taking a dump. Kat smiled at that. So many times she'd resisted the temptations to wipe her ass on that list of thou shalt nots and leave it lying around just to see the look on her parents' face. The pair of them would go apeshit, that much she was certain of. There'd be no turning the other cheek that night. It would be straight to DEFCON 5 and no stopping. She remembered the day she came home with her first tattoo at the age of 12. It was only a small image in 3 words, high on her right arm, hidden by the fabric of her blouse. But Dad had decided to hold a spot inspection because cleanliness was next to godliness. Yeah, right. Like the Almighty was looking for skid marks in your tighty-whities. Her mom had found the tattoo and freaked out, dropping to her knees and praying for forgiveness, begging to know why their eldest daughter had brought such shame upon the family. Dad favored the direct route, dragging Kat to the laundry and scrubbing her arm with a wire brush until the skin was shredded, the flesh beneath bloody and raw. Kat waited a year before she broke the rules again. On her 13th birthday, she proudly announced at the dinner table that Bobby Chambers had popped her cherry the night before. It was a lie, but it was worth the thrashing she received to see the horror on her parents' faces. Plainly, they were coming to the conclusion their beloved Catherine was possessed by a demon, or perhaps by Lucifer himself. Kat spent summer at Bible camp, getting deprogrammed by a lay minister who swore he could drive the devil from her. At least, that was how it started. By the end of the summer, he was in jail for having sex with a minor, and Kat was 2 months pregnant. She lost the baby, but by then her parents had surrendered all hope of saving their firstborn. They concentrated on the other 4 children, keeping contact with Kat to a minimum and forbidding her from speaking with her brothers and sisters. Kat had responded with an escalating series of outrages. First came more tattoos until half her body was covered in ink, most of it involving snakes, Satan, or other Christian-baiting sacrileges. Next was the body piercing, 12 studs in each ear, then on to both nostrils, then her eyebrows, her tongue, her belly button, and then even her nipples. By that time, she was running out of body parts to get pierced. So Kat had to cross the state line to find somewhere her parents hadn't picketed with their fundamentalist friends. Smoking and swearing were obligatory to get a rise from her parents, while lying was second nature. Shit. They could ask her if it was sunny outside on a hot day, and Kat would claim it was snowing, purely out of habit. But Elijah and Ruth had given up talking to her, preferring to break into prayer whenever she appeared at home, imploring the good Lord above to save her lost lamb. Only a local bylaw stating parents were responsible for their offspring until the age of 18 prevented them from throwing her out of the house. What a crock of shit, Kat thought, before tossing her cigarette into the immaculately kept rose garden beneath her window. Well, it was nearly 9, time to drag her sorry ass into school. She spent more time in detention than she did in class, but it was a good place to score some weed off Springwood High's resident dope dealer. Kat felt like getting high and was fresh out of supplies. She dug around in her khaki army surplus rucksack, but found nothing more useful than a lighter and a half a pack of Camels. Need some of them folding green before I can see Lloyd. He might be a grade A stoner, but Kat already owed him $50. She'd need to filch some dead presidents from her mom to fund any further off-your-face fun. Kat caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror opposite her bed. 6 foot tall, her fearsome gothic appearance daunted all but the cockiest of men, and that suited her fine. Aside from the many areas covered with tattoos, her skin was pure white, almost translucent. A mass of dyed jet-black hair surrounded her face, the metal of her pierced studs and rings glinting in the morning light. She changed her panties and pulled a black long-sleeve top on over her braless breast. Prominent nipples were another way of announcing her wanton, godless ways, according to her parents. Kat had tried pointing out the Bible didn't stipulate how women kept control of their tits, but got a slap across the face for her temerity. Well, at least nobody came into her bedroom anymore, not since the time Mom came in to collect laundry and found Kat getting busy in front of the mirror. Kat was left to wash her own sheets and clothes after that. She stepped into an ankle-length black skirt, pulled on her black boots, and left the house, stopping only to steal $60 from the Maxwell House coffee can hidden in the kitchen. It was a glorious day outside, with the sun climbing into the cloudless blue sky. Kat slid her black sunglasses into place, shielding her eyes from the bright light. "Another beautiful day in paradise," she sneered. "God, I hate this fucking place." Alex timed her arrival to perfection, approaching the main entrance to Springwood High as first bell rang inside. The school was a sturdy brick and concrete structure from the 1950s. A stained glass window over the front doors trying to create the impression that it was a cathedral of learning. Built to deal with the post-war surge of baby boomers reaching adolescence, Springwood High had stood the test of time as well. After first bell, students had 5 minutes to collect whatever books they needed for the morning's lessons from their lockers and reach the relevant classroom. In their favorite haunts, smokers were taking last drags of cigarettes before stubbing them out, while those looking to make trouble were reluctantly surrendering their latest victims. Students without the protection of a clique had 5 minutes to ghost through the halls, hit their locker, and then hurry to class. Alex had been in enough high schools to know her status in the food chain. She was fresh meat at Springwood and had to be on her guard. Don't attract attention. Don't catch anybody else's eye. Keep your head down and you could get through the day unharmed, unnoticed. She hurried through the double doors in the main entrance hall and made for her locker. A tall metal sanctuary among hundreds where she could hide a little of herself from prying eyes. She'd gotten lucky during allocations at the start of the term. Her locker was close to the girls' bathroom on the ground floor. The surrounding air was a perfumed battlefield, but that was way better than the foul stench of stale farts and despair outside the boys' bathroom. Alex spun the dial in her locker through the combination, then pulled open the door. She dumped her things, pulled out a biology textbook, and checked her spiky hair in the tiny mirror a previous student had glued inside the door. "What do you mean you haven't got it?" a voice demanded. One of the geeks, a brown-haired kid in glasses and a checked shirt, was under attack from Joey Johnston. Despite having only been a student here a few weeks, Alex already knew the names and faces of the resident bullies. It was another defense mechanism to keep her out of trouble. She also recognized the victim. He was in her class and always smiled at Alex when they bumped each other in the hallways, but she didn't know his name. Johnston was pushing the kid along the corridor towards her. The other students were backing away, hugging the walls to avoid getting involved. Johnston was being backed up by his goon squad, 3 thugs that would be more dangerous if they had a brain cell between them. "I forgot," the geek said, looking around for help that would never come. "You forgot? That's not good enough, O'Mahony." Johnston drew back a fist, ready to strike, but then the second bell rang through the halls, warning students they had less than a minute to reach their classes. Johnston unclenched his fist, gently slapping his victim on the side of the face instead. "Saved by the bell, you little shit. You've got till recess to finish my assignment or else. Meet me under the bleachers, O'Mahony, and don't make me come looking for you. That'll only make matters worse. Got it?" The other kid nodded meekly. Around him, the rest of the students were already scurrying to their classes. The prospect of a fight having evaporated, O'Mahony turned to go, but Johnston shoved out a leg, sending the geek sprawling again. The bully and his cronies swaggered away, laughing amongst themselves. Once they were gone, Alex noticed a pair of glasses beside her. She picked them up and offered them to O'Mahony. "Are these yours?" He squinted at her before nodding. Retrieving the glasses, he put them on and smiled at Alex, embarrassment reddening his face. "Thanks. My name's Peter O'Mahony." "Yeah, well, whatever." Alex twisted the dial in her locker, securing the door again. Time she was in class, don't get involved, just get through the day. You're in my class, aren't you? If you say so. Alex gathered her textbooks under one arm and strode away. Peter hurried after her, talking excitedly. Johnston and those guys, they expect me to do their homework. Alex ignored him, increasing the speed of her footsteps, but Peter kept pace. The sooner I can graduate and get out of this zoo, the better. Know what I mean? Alex stopped and glared at Peter. All I did was hand back your glasses, okay? I don't care about you, your life, or your problems. Get the message? He looked at her, a hurt expression in his eyes. I understand. Good. Alex pushed past him and into class, leaving Peter alone in the empty hallway. She was ashamed of herself, but it had to be done. Principal Shea wondered why he bothered sometimes. He had become a new teacher because he wanted to help the next generation achieve all that they could. He had become a principal with reluctance, however, knowing it would take him away from real teaching, but he still believed that it was a good way of making a difference. 5 years in charge of Springwood High was testing that belief. The students were no worse here than in any other high school. No, there was something else, a dark secret buried in the past of this town. The streets might be clean and tidy, the houses and gardens well kept, the lawns all neatly enclosed by white picket fences, but none of that could disguise the divide between the generations, a palpable sense of alienation between parents and their children. This was not the usual generational gap separating teenagers from their parents. This was something more sinister, more disturbing. A herd mentality, a mass hysteria had once gripped this place, turning decent, respectable adults into killers. A murdering child molester had escaped justice on a technicality. So the parents of this quiet Ohio town had taken matters into their own hands, burning him alive and rejoicing in their vengeance. Shea had been shocked when he learned about the incident, even though it had happened years ago. The legacy of that night was like a stain on the collective psyche of the community, imperceptible but still ever present. The details of what happened had been hushed up, with no adult daring to speak the dead man's name. He had become a boogeyman, a metaphor for the divide, where civilization gives way to savagery. Springwood had stepped over that line, and its children instinctively knew that. They did not trust their parents, but they wouldn't explain why, because they couldn't. They didn't know the reason, and it had to stay that way. Principal Shea took off his round-framed glasses and ran both hands through his graying collar-length curls. My hair was black before I came here, he thought bleakly. I'll be lucky to have any left by the time I retire. He put his glasses back on and opened the office door. Outside, a lineup of students was waiting to see him, each reporting for punishment or for counseling. Every day the lineup seemed longer. This place will be the death of me, Shea decided. He arranged a smile on his careworn features. Well, who's first for the firing squad today? He asked, trying to keep his voice cheerful and upbeat. His secretary, Grace, sat behind her desk in the waiting room, entering the day's attendance register into the school computer system. She pointed the end of a pencil at the first person in the waiting line. Miss Sutherland. She drove into your personal parking space without noticing you had already left your car there. An apologetic Heather stood outside Shea's office, a Band-Aid partly covering a cut on her forehead. Sorry, she winced. Shea nodded wearily and motioned for her to go inside. Grace, could you find the number for my insurance agent? I haven't seen the damage to my car yet, but I suspect I'm going to need his help. Alex had surprised herself by staying awake through biology, never her favorite subject. But an hour of history devoted entirely to the achievements of Ohio's most important people soon had her eyelids at half-mast. There was only so much excitement she could muster for a lecture about the state's 8 presidents. It concluded with the less than scintillating life story of Warren Gamaliel Harding, inventor of the front porch campaigning style, Yawn Central. Alex still wasn't sure what to make of last night's bizarre dream, but one thing was certain. It had left her completely exhausted, and Springwood's local history expert and aging spinster, Miss Staines, was not helping her stay awake. It was a blessed relief when the bell rang for the end of class, but Alex's happiness was short-lived once she checked her schedule for the last period before recess. English with Mr. Mycroft, the dullest man in town. She dragged herself into the stuffy room and took a seat near the open windows, hoping a few faint breezes might drift into the stifling atmosphere and keep her awake. The boredom was thicker than the dust on the bookshelves lining the back wall. Mr. Mycroft was a confirmed bachelor, but of the old-school kind. He wasn't gay. He was simply more interested in books and literature than sex. No wonder he's never gotten married, Alex thought, studying his drab choice of clothing. He was clad in a tweed jacket with suede patches at the elbows, a bow tie, and suspenders holding up his green corduroy pants. Mr. Mycroft's passion was reserved for poetry, the work of Shelley, a particular favorite. He selected a volume of verse and invited Johnson forward to read it aloud, eliciting a collective groan of despair from the other students. "That will do," Mr. Mycroft scolded them. The graying hair scraped over his bald scalp, flapping slightly with the breeze coming in from the windows. "Poetry enriches the soul and inspires the mind. Now, Mr. Johnson, if you would be so kind, let us start with the poem, Adonis, for our young audience." Joey smirked and began reading, his droning voice crushing all hope of Alex staying awake for much longer. "He hath awakened from the dream of life. 'Tis we who, lost in stormy vision, keep with phantoms on unprofitable strife." Alex felt her limbs growing heavier, her head slumping forward onto the desk, her eyelids drooping down until no light could pass them. Joey's voice continued in the background, but was becoming ever more distant. "And in mad trance strike with our spirit's knife, invulnerable nothings." "Miss Corwin!" Alex sat bolt upright, shocked awake by Mr. Mycroft's shouts. The other students surrounding her were laughing, several pointing at her. "Sorry," she stammered quickly. "I only closed my eyes for a moment." The English teacher shook his head sadly. "I weep for the future if you pupils are a representation sample of the generation to come. Where are the great minds, the thinkers, the poets, the bringers of wonder? Not to be found here, I fear. Literature has little hope of surviving the 21st century." "Sorry," Alex repeated. By now, Johnson had returned to his seat, and Mr. Mycroft was writing something on the blackboard. "It's not good enough at all. Since this class seems incapable of appreciating the words of Shelley, I shall have to try something a little less demanding. I want all of you to copy down this nursery rhyme 100 times. Perhaps then you will pay more attention to great writing." Alex winced in pain as a textbook struck her in the head, knocking her pen and papers to the floor. She turned to see Johnson giving her the finger. "Thanks a lot, bitch. I'll deal with you later." Mr. Mycroft finished writing the nursery rhyme on the blackboard and stepped away so all the students could read it. "Well, start copying!" he shouted. Alex retrieved her pen from the floor and began copying the rhyme into her notebook. Silently, she began mouthing the words as she wrote. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, grab a crucifix. 7, 8, gonna stay up late. 9, 10, never sleep again. She sat back and read the words over again. Weird. This was no nursery rhyme she'd ever heard before. Alex considered asking Mr. Mycroft about its origins, but decided against it. "I've already gotten the class in trouble. Don't ask for more attention." She started copying the rhyme for a second time, but an ear-piercing sound cut through the air. It set her teeth on edge, and seemed to have the same effect on the rest of the class. All the other students were covering their ears, trying to block out the noise, their face filled with pain. Alex did not have to search far for the source. Mr. Mycroft was standing with his back to the class, dragging his hands up and down the blackboard. "This'll teach you to appreciate poetry more, you little shits," he shouted, but the voice wasn't that of Mr. Mycroft anymore. It was deeper, gravelly, almost distorted. And his jacket wasn't a jacket anymore either. It was a sweater of dirty red and green stripes. He looked back over his shoulder, and Alex felt a scream die in her throat. It was him, the creature from her dream, and the sound was coming from his fingernails scraping across the blackboard. He twisted around to face the class, holding the 4 blades to his face. Several students screamed in horror as he ripped the blades downward, slicing the skin from his features. "Everybody repeat after me," he commanded. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Nobody spoke. "Say it!" 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, a few of the students said. "That's not good enough," he replied and lashed out, swiping his razors through the neck of the nearest girl. She collapsed to the floor, hands flapping helplessly as blood spurted from her wounds, spraying other students like a crimson aerosol. "Say it!" More of the students joined in, then more. Soon everybody in the class was chanting the rhyme. Everybody but Alex. She couldn't speak, couldn't do anything. Outside the window she could see other pupils relaxing on the glass, strolling across the grounds, chatting happily with each other. None of them noticed the horrors happening inside the classroom. Alex turned back to find the monster standing over her, blood dripping from the 4 blades on his right hand. The rest of the students were gathered behind him, their faces a snarling mass of fury as they repeated the first line of the rhyme, chanting it over and over. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. His good hand lifted Alex up by the throat and out of the chair, holding her so high her feet were kicking in the air. The gloved hand with its gleaming, bloodied fingerknives was drawn back, poised to slash at her face. He licked his lips and leered at her. "Say it, bitch! Say my name! Tell me how much you want me! Tell me, bitch!" Alex found her voice at last. If she was going to die, she wasn't going to let this creep have the satisfaction of breaking her first. She screamed as loud as she could. "Fuck you! Miss Corwin! I don't believe that's the sort of language you should be using at this school, let alone in my class." Alex sat up with a start to find Mr. Mycroft standing over her, a look of shock and disappointment on his face. Behind him, the rest of the class was laughing, her obscene outburst a welcome relief from the usual tedium of Mr. Mycroft's lessons. Inside her notebook, she could see the nursery rhyme from her dream, scrawled in her own handwriting. Alex looked at the blackboard, but the only text on it was the extract from Shelley's poem Johnston had been reading earlier. I'm sorry," she said, shrugging. I must have been having a daydream." The teacher frowned at her. "Daydream or not, that's no excuse for resorting to foul-mouthed explicits. Nor should you be sleeping in my class to begin with, young lady." "I'm sorry," Alex repeated. "I didn't get much sleep last night." "I have no interest in your extracurricular activities, Miss Corwin. In or out of the bedroom." That brought another howl of laughter from the other students. "I simply wish you to stay awake during my lessons." He returned to the front of the class and tried to bring it to order. "Well, now that you've all had a good laugh, let's move on to discuss the next stanza of this important..." But the bell for recess cut him off. Students were already bolting for the classroom door, leaving Mr. Mycroft shouting after them. "Tomorrow I want all of you to have read this poem and prepared an analysis of its rhyme structure." Nobody was listening. Nobody cared. It was time for food and fun and mingling with the rest of the school. Contemplating Shelley was no substitute for real life. Alex was last to leave, not wanting to see any of her classmates for a while. Her embarrassment would soon be forgotten, replaced by some other, more recent incident. But for now she wanted to climb into a hole and vanish. Alex paused by the blackboard where Mr. Mycroft was wiping away the verse he had written earlier. She showed him the nursery rhyme inside her notebook. "Excuse me, Mr. Mycroft, but do you recognize these words?" He glanced at the writing. Within moments the color was draining from his face. "Where did you get that from?" "I don't know," Alex admitted. "Is it important?" The teacher shook his head, a strange look crossing his features. No. I think it's a local rhyme, something from days gone by. Nobody uses that anymore. I suggest you just forget all about it." "Oh," Alex said, mystified by his reaction. Mr. Mycroft hurriedly gathered his things and began pushing her out of the room. "If you'll excuse me, I have to lock the class during recess. School regulations. Cuts down on vandalism." Alex let herself be shoved out into the hall. The elderly teacher locked the door behind him, then strode towards the staff room, muttering under his breath. Alex could have sworn she saw his hand shaking as he left. Okay, this has been chapters 1 and 2 of A Nightmare on Elm Street: Suffer the Children. I hope you're all enjoying it so far. And don't forget, the Analog Time Traveler has won my copy of Friday the 13th, Church of the Divine Psychopath. Don't forget to contact me on Reddit and get me your information. Don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment, hit that like button, and click the bell for future updates on future chapters. I will be doing more giveaways as we go on through all these series of books of Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Jason X. Until next time, have a great night. People
again.